Pen and ink is, I think, my second most favorite medium, and I just happened to find it like by chance because there was no other tool. So I started drawing with pen, but then what I realized is that with pen, the two things happen. One is that you get a line that is so confident no matter what you do, and second is there is no going back. Once you draw the line, you just have to go forward. So you have no room for hesitation and no room for second guessing, which I later realized is what happens when we are working with pencil. That's why I keep insisting that all of you work with pencil without an eraser. But now there is going to be no erasing, so I don't have to give you that instruction. Feel free to sit in a room full of erasers. It's going to be completely useless this whole month and also next month. So, from the students' feedback, like Amulya, over the years, what I found is that working with pen and ink has changed how many students have worked, or their process of working at all. So I'll give you an overview of what we're going to do through the month. With pen and ink, there are a lot of possibilities. Today, I'm just going to introduce you to the medium and to the materials. And then as we proceed, we are going to take different topics. We're going to do different skill building exercises and also finished artwork. And then we're going to use all of this next month to bring that into lettering, because lettering also a lot of times does use ink more than paint. And once you are familiar with the flexible nib, you will be able to grasp many of these casual scripts easily. You will have an introduction to calligraphy as well, and then if you want to, then you all can switch on to a calligraphy batch. But I'm going to have to start a new batch because the current batch is already very packed, so can't do much there. Anyway, so let's begin. I'm going to show you a bunch of materials that I have worked with in the past. I've given you just the small sample set that you should have, because there's really no point in collecting all of this. Eventually, I know you will go to every store and hoard all sorts of stuff, but I might as well tell you what you can hoard so that later on you don't feel I can't do anything with this. Right. So, a little bit of history. So, ink has been a very ancient medium for writing and especially formal writing, and you can trace it back to even Egyptian times. So, when we think of mediums, we are introduced to pencil first, but that is the youngest medium that was invented. Going further back, you have paint, and then, of course, you have ink that has been like the bedrock throughout all sorts of art. Inks were different kinds. You can use a very basic ink that you will get is a charcoal based ink, and literally you can just grind some charcoal with some oil and water and use that to make marks on paper. That's how charcoal ink or most of our black inks work. Waterproof inks usually have some kind of element in it that dries it up very fast and makes it water fast. So you can paint on top of it. And this is a medium that can often be seen used in things like maps or engineering drawings, because you don't want these inks to fade or to wash away because of wear and tear. Now, a lot of artists use them as a base on which then they can start painting, because it gives a very dramatic look to your pictures. So, the inks that I have told you to get is this waterproof ink, either this one or this one. Black Star is something that I swear by because it just works wonderfully. That's the one that we will use today. If you do not have Black Star, it doesn't matter. We are not going to be mixing watercolor on top of it, so we just need something to dip our nibs in and draw. It can be absolutely anything. Then you have some more organic inks, like I made my own walnut ink. You don't have to make your own, you do get a very nice walnut ink. But if you land up in Kashmir, you'll notice that they have a lot of walnuts and they throw away the husk. So you can get a little bit, I'm literally a little bit of husk. It's usually just a waste product, and then convert that into ink by just boiling the hell out of it. But there are two types of inks. You have a brown walnut and you have a black walnut. So you get different types of inks. And I generally like to do all sorts of DIY. So I have one charcoal collection happening also. So at some point I'll try to make my own black ink. And then you have the commercially bought walnut ink, which I have in my inkwell. So I'm going to draw with this and show you how this looks. In commercial inks, you will also get different colors. So you will get a sepia tone, you'll get purples and blues and all. And those are also very interesting to bring in into your art. Now I'll tell you the holders. So this is just a small fraction of my hoard of inks and nibs. There are hundreds of nibs that you can choose for drawing, and the ones that I've recommended are these Zebra G nibs because they're very versatile. You can draw with them, you can write with them, and they come in these nice packets of 10, which can last you a good year or so also. The holder we are using that again I recommended was this one, which was this I think a Tachikawa or something. Yeah, Tachikawa holder, which comes with a rubber grip. And this is a nice soft grip, rather large, which helps you to write better, longer, without cramping your fingers. So this is the ideal combination. This holder, these nibs, and black star. You just get this. I know it's a little expensive, but it can take you a long way. Then this was another holder that also I recommended, this and something like it, which has a smaller ring in which you insert a nib called the crow quill. So this is intended to mimic the quill of a crow, really, to make really fine lines. And you just need to insert that into the hole and you're good to go. These were drawing tools used for or nibs used for drawing in the past and also in art colleges. This is what was recommended. But nowadays most artists are using something like this. Then I've also worked with just a bamboo that has been scored to create a nice sharp edge. It doesn't have a reservoir. You can see it is cracked also. So you might think that this is some really sophisticated piece of bamboo or something, but this is leftovers from an old cane chair that we had to discard. I salvaged maybe 5 or 10 pieces just for a lark, tried to shave it into a nib and use it, and it works brilliantly. So I have a couple of these. Some are cut to a point for drawing and some are cut at an angle for Gothic writing. So right from something as modest as throwaway furniture to something fancy like this, or something even fancier like a glass pen. These are not very expensive but definitely very fancy. I'm going to show you how to draw with this as well. The reservoir very cleverly is in the tip itself. So the ink sits in the ridges, which are very cleverly designed to direct the flow of the ink to the tip. Unfortunately, my glass tip is slightly damaged, so I'm not getting very smooth lines, and I have to go to a glass grinder to just smoothen it, and maybe that should start working. Alright, so we are going to learn a little bit about how to draw with pen and ink, and as we proceed I'll use some of these other inks also and I'll show you. So at the outset, please keep something like this on your table, a piece of maybe a cloth or a board, because it is often the case that when you are a beginner at dipping, you don't dip straight in and out. You do something like this and invariably your ink is going to fall on your book. It is going to happen at least once. No matter how old you think you are, and of course you've handled liquids, it's never going to happen to you, but believe me, it does. So keep something so that you don't feel too bad and you have anticipated your own clumsiness. Now I'd ask for an inkwell because we are going to decant some of this ink into a small container which has a lid. This is a glass uh, ink well which has a metal. This is what you get usually in calligraphy stores in the US. So if there's anyone going, I can send you a link to the store that you can have it ordered from. They'll send it to that address and they can bring it for you. Ordering it over here is frightfully expensive. It'll cost 20 times as much for such a tiny object. Or else you can get a container like this, which is also available in the same store, but it is slightly bigger. I think this is a 3-ounce container. Oh no, 1.5-ounce container. And I've got these holders, but I can't find my containers. So it sits at an angle that way, and also it sits flat, so it's very stable. So what you need is a heavy bottomed container so that a little bit of tipping here or there does not trigger it to fall. If you do not have any of these, and if you are currently using a very lightweight container, you can create a little base using our flexible eraser. At least there's some use of the eraser in this. So you create a little seat like this and place it on your table where you can secure your inkwell so that it does not move. This is good enough as well. Alright, now keep a rag handy. And I've already mixed some ink in this, so I'm going to tell you the proportion to mix the ink in, but we'll do that just when we have to draw. Now all nibs are coated with some kind of oil or solution that keeps them from rusting while in storage. Now what I do is, once I take out a nib from its original container and I start using it, I don't put it back in the same container, because a little bit of wear and tear on this nib will start creating pockets of rust, which is invariable. They are biodegradable in that sense. So you need to have a separate container in which you can store your used nibs. So I just use one of these where I have a whole lot of my other nibs, and then you can obviously develop a system and keep your nibs safely there. This is just me trying to be a little careful. Now there's 2-3 ways in which you can get rid of the oil covering. One is you can stick the nib in a potato. So take a raw potato, just stick the nib in that for 5 minutes, and the juices or starch in the potato will remove the oil or the coating quite efficiently. The second trick is to use a flame. So if you have a lighter or you have a candle, just hold the nib on top of the candle and remove the oil. The third trick is stick the nib in your mouth. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you. So just take the tip and actually chew on it. Because you don't have a potato handy and you don't have a flame. So do this for a little bit, and I have come across calligraphers who actually rotate that nib all over their mouth. This is not my favorite technique of removing the coating, but it works. And sometimes when you desperately want to just start painting, the last thing you want to do is go and hunt for a potatoes. Just put it in your mouth and you're going to get the oil going, the ink going. All right, so while you have your nib in your mouth, we are going to mix our ink. So use about one, uh, this is not a capful, but one entire section of this dropper in your container. And then you can use the same measure by either using another dropper if you have it, or use a spoon to add water into your inkwell to double the amount of ink you have. Now, while that is dissolving, you can just shut it. It might start mixing. You insert the nib along the larger groove. There are two grooves in this. One groove is for the crocus, that is the inside groove. But we are using a zebra G that goes on the outside. So this is how it would fit in. But I don't have to use both nibs. Okay, so there's a circle in the center and there's a circle outside of that. That is where your nib will fit. Holding the tip firmly, you can just press it far inside. It's not going to come out. It's pretty stable. So now we have to do this dance of drawing, dipping, and drawing and dipping, and this will require some rhythm which you will organically develop. So how many lines you draw before you dip and all, you'll figure that out. So the first thing we're going to do is, if you have something like this, and this is a porcupine quill, again, not necessary, but you can just use some kind of thin material, maybe a toothpick, to stir the ink so that the water and the ink mixes. Now the proportion that I've given you is a 50-50 proportion, right? 50 ink and 50 water. We are going to test how that ink looks when it is mixed with the same amount of water to dilute it. The reason I use a porcupine quill is because it comes out very clean. I don't know how these organic materials work. It's like they're in a club of their own. This ink is probably organic, this is probably organic. So they just talk to each other and say, okay, don't stain me. He says, okay, fine, I won't. And they're good to go. All right. So now you can take your nibs out of your mouth and assemble our writing tool. And though I know it does not need to be said, remember to dip your pens very gently into the ink. Try not to go all the way down and touch the tip to the bottom. I know our hands sometimes are really heavy, you just want to do a tuck, 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 but that will slowly start damaging the tip of your nib. So the process is to insert the nib, load the pen. The drawing inks are a lot more viscous than writing inks, so they're a little thicker and they will latch onto your nib. Newer nibs, you will see that the ink will bead over. For a few dips, let it be. Okay, and this is how we're going to start drawing. When you are drawing with this, we can draw like a regular pen. We are going to draw some horizontal lines and hold your pen sideways. So we are basically just making some marks on paper. and keep drawing the line um, till you run out of ink. So this gives you an idea of the capacity of your nib. Okay. Now our nibs have this ability to flex. If you put a little pressure, the two tines will split. So let's try making lines by splitting the tines. Again, just dip the tip of the nib, and I'm going to start adding a little bit of pressure. And here the ink finishes much faster. Just one line is usually enough. Now, mind you, I have dipped only till about this part of the nib. But if you notice, there's a hole in the center. This hole is meant to hold more ink like a reservoir. So when we dip our pens in the inkwell, we should try to cover this hole. So for the next part, dip your nibs. You might have to tilt it a little bit because I know the quantity of ink that I've suggested is very little. So tilt the nib inkwell a little bit. Drain any excess ink on the side of your inkwell, and you'll see that the reservoir is completely covered. And now we can start drawing lines. And let's see how far we can go. Maybe twice as much. Okay, now at this point I feel that you can make a very thick line by pressing your nib really hard. There is a threshold. So far I've never had a student break a nib, but I'm sure they can be broken. So just press it more than you would think is usual, because we need to see whether the consistency of our ink is accurate. Okay, so once you draw this line, I want you to just look, wait for it to dry and then hold it against the light to see what kind of black you get. So in order to know what the right consistency is, we do a little bit of experimenting in proportion of ink versus water. If your ink seems to be rather thick like tar, then the 50-50 proportion is not accurate. So I'm going to add another some amount of water in it again. So now it will become a 2:1 ratio of water to ink. Try doing that to see if the flow improves. So what we're aiming for is a smooth flow of ink, yet a very dark black line. Okay, now here's a tip. After you have drawn a few lines, you must keep wiping your nib, but do not wash it. Do not put in water, do not use soap. You need to wipe it dry, and if there is a lot of ink, just this time stick it in a potato, and you can leave it in a potato for up to half an hour, not a problem, and then wipe it clean off the starch without using water or soap. Okay, ink stirred. Now I'm going to draw the thick line again to test if I'm getting a good flow to the line. So compared to the first line, I have a thick loop over here. The second line is better. I'm going to add some more water. make it almost 3:1 ratio of ink and water, and check for flow again. Yeah, much better. Now, as you can see, the ink looks pretty much the same. The darkness is not changing much. If you use the ink without diluting in water at all, you might get a very shiny finish, which means that there's just far too much ink than water. But as you start adding water, the flow increases, but the darkness does not change. That is, I guess, that is how you would gauge the quality of the ink. So you can keep diluting it till you feel that you're getting a line that is gray. I've again added a little more water. And this is added to the ink that I started using on Saturday. So it has stayed pretty well. It became a little thick in the bottom, but it has worked well. So this is 1:1. This is 1:2. This is 1:3. And this is 1:4. Okay, now for those of you who might not know, I doubt it, you do have to write in such a way that the round part of the nib is pointing up. I've had some young students who have never written with an ink pen who thought that you might have to write like this, where you use the ink in the nib and use the nib like a trough and direct the line like that. I mean, it's a very innocent mistake. I would have also thought that. But you have to do it this way. The ink sits at the bottom and is transported onto the paper through capillary action, which means that you cannot move the pen in the opposite direction. You have to always move the pen in such a way that the nib is leading the ink. So all your actions or all your drawings can be drawn. I mean, if it's a hairline, which is this, you can pretty much move the line anyhow you want to. But if it is a shade like this must also always be drawn in the line of the nib or parallel to the nib. You'll get this later on. I'm just showing you this because I don't want you to try to press the pen holding it perpendicular to the line that you're drawing and expect that the tines are going to split. Alright? Okay. So let's start making a few lines to understand how the medium is meant to work. Let's make a few circles, not squares this time. Already I feel some people might be wondering why circles. I have a problem even drawing squares. How are my circles going to look? So I call this medium pretty much Bhagwan Bharose medium. Just put your pen to paper and then just whatever happens, happens. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's something else. Just change your intent, not your expectation. So the whole point of pen and ink is to make all sorts of lines to create, you have form, structure, texture, depth. Um, Depth would also be field. Then you also have mm, highlights, I guess. Yeah, dimension. Now, all of this is very easy when you are working with color and pencil, because you can create this by using different colors in different places. But imagine creating all of this with just one color, and all you can do is change the quality of line. So, the first circle we are going to make only lines coming down. And I want you to take your time making these lines. They look hurried and haphazard, but there is a very nice meditative quality to making these lines. So
Sorry,
let's make, yeah,
sorry, can you show me the circle drawing again? I just want to see the name again.
the
Because,
circle drawing,
yeah, I was busy doing the ratios of the water, and I missed how the pen moves with the circle.
just like a regular pen.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, no mystery
sure.
there.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now hold your pen a little further than you normally do, and keep a very light action like this. In fact, you might also want to consider holding your thumb close to your first knuckle, or in the space near your first and second knuckle. So you want to just use this like a pendulum or pendulous movement so that your lines become lighter. Maybe you want to watch this part. This allows you to make consistent lines without moving your full hand. Normally, if you want to make this line, the process is you will move your whole hand down, and that causes the line to wobble. There's nothing wrong with a wobbling line, but there is also something more that you can do with ink. You might as well learn to do that. So you get slightly more confident strokes with that grip. It's just tuck, tuck, tuck like that. Very simple. Keep your wrist steady, your fingers steady, just the two, three fingers that are holding the pen move. So, this is our first line. The second line you'll make about the same sized lines but spread them apart just a little bit. And the third one, spread them apart even more. You don't have to keep them right below one another. We're not trying to make patterns today. We're just trying to fill in space. The amount of ink you fill in will determine how dark or how light you want the tone to be. So this is all tonal study. Now this one is just drawing. Often this is called hatching.
Aditi, let me interrupt you.
Yeah, no problem.
Uh, so I don't know if it's got anything to do with the dilution, but I see that when I hadn't diluted the ink as much the
Huh?
first time around, the lines were finer. And once I've diluted them, I'm using the same amount of force or pressure, but the lines have come out a little thicker. Does that have anything to do with how much I've diluted the ink?
What ink are you using?
It's the Noodler's ink.
Noodlers. All right. Try wiping your nib.
Okay. Okay.
Now, because this is waterproof ink, it'll keep caking over your uh, nib, and the tip starts becoming slightly thicker. So once, let's say I said, after every few strokes, just wipe the nib and dip again. Let me know if it has worked. Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's better. Yeah.
All right, super. All right, now the next one we're going to do is cross hatching. This is probably one of the most common shading tools used. In this, we are going to keep changing the angle of each section. So you can start off from the right, and notice how I'm not changing the angle of my nib. I'm holding it in a normal at a normal angle, and I'm drawing lines in all different angles from there. First I drew vertical, now I'm drawing at a diagonal. The next series of lines on the same circle will be slightly upright. So now this looks like it's about at 45 degrees to the edge of the paper. It can be 45, 50, it doesn't matter. Basically at a sharp angle. Now we can make the next series of lines the same distance apart, but this time change the angle and make it a little more upright. Now, if you squint your eyes and look at this circle, you will see that the center looks a little darker. Now, this is the purpose of the cross hatching. We are creating tonal values by increasing the amount of ink in certain spaces. Now, if we want the bottom half to look darker than the top half, remember the first line, the angle that we made at? Make a second row of lines in the same angle as the first angle that you chose, and you will have achieved depth. See, it's as simple as that. It's just a process of shifting your lines and creating depth. Now we have two sets of lines in the bottom half. We have the 45-degree angle and the slightly more upright angle. Now if we make it even more upright or even lean it to the other side and draw more lines, or maybe we can make it flatter. In a smaller section, this section will start looking darker. And this is cross hatching. One cross hatching style. Okay, how comfortable do you feel using the nib? All good? Okay, now let's add a little complexity to our texture. Now from the bottom to top, we are going to start making a pattern. This is, this is also a kind of cross hatching where you will draw three or four lines which are parallel to each other, pretty close, and then another set of three or four lines which are perpendicular, and keep doing that kind of texture throughout. We want to maintain the distance between the lines, not so much the angle, so long as after every 3-4 lines you change the angle. This was one of the, I guess, most favored textures that Mario Miranda uses in his cartoons. So you will find that you might get a little confused. Where do I do vertical? Where do I do horizontal? Don't get too involved in making it look too precise, because then it'll look very predictable and boring. So long as you change the angle very acutely after every 3-4 lines, you will achieve this slightly scrabbly effect. And when you come to about 2/3 of the distance up the circle, you can start increasing the distance between the lines. So, whatever you do, you have to just keep an eye on how much ink you are depositing in one area versus another by whatever means. And as you proceed further, you can increase the distance even more, reduce the number of lines that you are making in each section, and spread them out even more. In the beginning, this whole thing looks so ugly, I know it, and you wonder whether you're doing it right. But once you finish, you'll realize what the effect is all about. And you should get it. So here in these three, we have achieved tone. And through tone, we've also achieved a certain texture. Structure and form are pretty simple. We make a circle, that is the form and text structure. Now we have to show dimension. So how do we show an object, a circle, to be a three-dimensional sphere? One easy way is to start off by making just contour lines around the circle like this, like you would make latitude lines on a globe. And as you come to the center, start breaking that line. This will start giving the illusion of a highlight. I've kept my lines pretty far apart, but you can always go back in and make more lines. And you can end the lines with a dotted tail. So I'm putting, as I'm lifting my nib up, I am trailing off with a series of dots in the same direction, almost like the track of a skipping stone on water. So now that we know that we can change the tone of an area just by adding more ink, and by maintaining texture we can add dimension. You can keep doing that till you are satisfied with the tone to create depth. So here we have texture, and we have depth, and we have tone. So these are contour lines. So what I'm showing you over here are techniques of different kinds of textures in order to create some of these aspects of your drawing. So form, structure, texture, depth, dimension and tone are aspects of any artwork. What is missing over here is color, because we are working with a monochromatic medium. But what we are doing over here are practicing different kinds of textures in order to create these. Now, the texture over here means two things: a texture that resembles the object that you want to make, and these are just different kinds of scribbles that create some texture or another, the application of which then depends on what you want to achieve at the end. Okay, so you realize what we're doing here and how these two are linked and are also different. Now here's another way of making depth and dimension. Imagine a circle on the top right and make some lines like a starburst. These are straight lines going out. And then after you've done that, make another circle of lines about the same distance apart from each other and the same height as, or the length as, the previous line. And start making this. As you start proceeding outward, you can start curving the lines a little bit based on how they are, what direction they're heading. So as they come over here to the top right, they become straight, bottom left, they become straight, but on the sides they take a little bit of the curve of the circle. Lines that are going to the right will curve to the right. As they come to the top, they will become straight. As they start coming to the left, they will curve to the left. You can make the lines left to right, right to left, it doesn't matter here. And they come to the bottom, they become straight again. If you don't know where to curve and you just draw straight lines, even that is fine. So these are just lines. The next one we will make can be very fun and easy or can be stressful. We are going to just make scribbles. So let your hand move along the surface. We have to create this kind of effect. We're still creating dimension. So I have to make a highlight on the top right, but I have to keep adding some ink in the other areas so that they become slightly darker, and the end that's opposite to the highlight becomes the darkest. So I can make long lines, I can make short scribbly lines. One might think that making scribbles is very easy, but See how many different directions you can move your hand. These, of course, are scribbles. Okay, let's wipe our nib one more time for the next texture. Next, let's try making some shapes. So, those of you who remember how to make a cube, make two dots a certain distance apart. Imagine the center by keeping your finger there, and then draw a dot above and below the imagined line that connects the first two lines. So I've drawn point 1, point 2. Visualize the center and then drew one dot on top, one dot at the bottom. Now connect these. It's not too complicated, it's a flattened diamond shape. Now from the center bottom dot, drop a line a certain distance towards the bottom of the page. And then from the other two sides, drop two lines which end shorter or higher than the first line you've drawn, and then join these corners. Now let's try making a textured three-dimensional box out of this. Let's keep any one side free of lines and draw lines on two sections. So I'm drawing the same line across two sections. Remember, one of those sections is going to end before the other. So pay attention to what you have to draw on. Now I'm just going to finish off in the other section. So it's real fun if you can maintain this distance between the lines, but it's not necessary. Now I'm going to keep the top the way it is, and I'm going to turn my book so that I can continue to make those kind of vertical lines, but in this they will appear sideways. They are not necessarily parallel to the top and bottom edges.
And the one after cross hatching, what's the name for that? The circle, that technique.
Sorry?
The third one after hatching and cross hatching, the third one.
This one, I'm trying to remember what it's called, because this is also a part of cross hatching, but it can often be called tiling. These names are quite informal. So while hatching, cross hatching, scribbles, lines, then you have stippling, all of that is known, but there are sometimes you'll find different names in different books, or different artists use different names. Okay, once our box is done, we are going to make a cylinder. Now, cylinders are also constructed in the same way, more or less. You start with two dots, and we are going to draw two curves to join this, except that before you draw the curves, you will make very short vertical lines on these dots, and then join those lines using a curved line. That way you ensure that you don't get pinched edges. Drop a line to the bottom and then copy the curve from the top. Now we have to fill this with a particular kind of line, and for that let's go back to our testing area. We have to make a line that is thick at one end and then slowly reduces and becomes thin on the other end, and we have to curve it as well. So practice this line, making it thick, then making it thin, thick, thin, and see how long you can draw this line. Those of you who are sitting under a fan or in air conditioning, you might want to dilute your inks one more time, especially if you're using Black Star. It starts thickening really fast. Okay, another thing about process, I don't know whether I need to mention it, but I'm just staying on the safe side. Keep your ink on the side of your working hand. So if you're right-handed, your ink, water will be on your right-hand side, rag on your left. If you're left-handed, ink, nib, water on your left hand, rag on your right hand. So avoid picking up ink from the opposite side of your work, because otherwise you will very easily start dropping stuff, smudging stuff just out of bad process. Now this cylinder has to be filled up like this. With lines that start off normal, become slightly thick, and then reduce in thickness. They can end in the same place, but we are trying to almost create a place where all the thick parts come one below the other. So at that part, we have to start pressing. I start off normal and I press, and then I come further. You might want to increase the distance between all the starting points, knowing that your line is going to thicken at some point and you don't want it to merge with the previous line. Do you see how this is creating an illusion of dark and light? You could also see color in this, honestly. It is an amazing illusion. How's it going? Are you getting it? Okay, let's try a few more exercises. Today is all about exercises, getting your hand flowing. Okay, another thing is this does require certain anchoring of the hand. So make sure that you're holding the book when you're drawing. If you're not holding the book and if you're trying to draw without any anchoring, your hand will start feeling a little shaky. So it's very important to keep your hand steady. This almost acts like the base of like a table lamp that you can pivot the top very easily, but the base is what gives it stability. So here's what you can do. Try this whole just many versions of the same line that has a hairline and a pressure stroke all built in. You can create a textured line like that. Pressure, no pressure, pressure, no pressure. And in this itself, you can create texture by alternating the place where you're going to put pressure.
Aditi,
Huh?
so from the thin to the thick, when I press the nib, all the ink just pours out at the point where it is just about beginning to become thick.
Right.
What am I doing?
Are you filling it up to the point where the reservoir is not visible? Let me show you what happens. Just keep an eye on this. There is going to be a an empty area that will reveal itself. See? So that part needs to be full. You can make a reasonable amount of lines. It should not empty out too fast. Okay. Next, what can we do? Yeah, you can try making lines going thick to thin horizontally also. Thick to thin, then thin to thick, slowly increasing pressure. So if something like that happens, all you need to do is go back to that point, press the same amount, and drag out a line again. Okay, now let's try making a cylinder in one of these styles. So let's try the hatching first, but we will change the direction of the lines. So here we have parallel lines. Okay, let's try a simple exercise. Make the lines on the left very close to each other. And these are hair lines, no pressure lines, just hair lines. As you come towards the center, start subtly increasing the distance between the lines. And as you come to the right, increase them even further till you get something like this. Now, even without cross hatching or crossing any lines, you can still create this beautiful dimension by using only lines. Okay, now I'm going to use my walnut ink and show you how that ink looks. Let me know when you're done. I don't want to rush you. Take your time making these lines.
Aditi, after all these exercises, I can only think of Van Gogh's Starry Night, attempting to do that with just ink.
Try it. It is an amazing exercise. It's just absolutely lovely. Okay, so here's my walnut ink. I'm making the same. Okay, I just want you to observe how I'm drawing though. I'm not restricting or restraining my line. So make lines which are very fluid. The whole point of drawing in ink is you get this. It's literally a fluid medium. So your lines should not be restrained. So the last thing I want you to do is draw lines like this. Believe me, when we draw animals, we will have the opportunity to draw lines like these. But straight lines for objects should not be drawn like this at all. How bad can your line be? Just let it flow. Also, if you hold the book, your hand will move much lighter than you think it would be. And if you make that a habit over time, your hand knows that it has stability. Even with pencil, it will start moving much lighter. You have to keep your other hand stable somewhere. Alright, let's try the cross hatching technique. Now, use that 45-degree angle to cover 3/4 of your cylinder so that it looks somewhat like this. Now see how beautiful this ink is if you want to do a very light colored, not a very intrusive painting. You can create this and also paint over it afterwards, and this might be, this ink might get totally absorbed. Now let's make it a little more upright and make parallel lines till about half the way into the cylinder. Oh, can you see this? How such a lovely dimensioning without any effort. And the last one, we'll keep it vertical instead of making it shallow. Just a quarter of the way in, you can make these vertical lines and you will create this. And now for a shadow, you can do a pressure line on the left and on the bottom left of the cylinder only, just this part. So this will look like a shadow. Okay, so you do realize that this is the exercise we have to do. Now the glass nib that I have, you cannot put pressure on. So this is the best thing to use for what I'm going to show you now is stippling. Now stippling in my mind is something to torture people with, and it's the, oh, one second, just excuse me for a minute. All right, so stippling is just making dots. So you can make them with your nib as well. All you do is very gently make dots on the surface. They don't have to be pressure strokes at all. They are just touching the paper with whatever nib you're holding. That is why this glass pen works very well. There is no way I can make a dot bigger than the tip it has. And that allows for a certain uniformity in texture. So, as is revealed, this is the painful texture that you have to do. This is one of the best looking textures you can make in black and white pen art, but it just takes forever and ever and ever. And in order for it to look good, you have to very consciously make these marks. You can't just do like a tuck, 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 because if you do that, you start getting like weird shaped marks. Sometimes they are dashes, sometimes they are like little comets, and that just spoils everything. It's like when in doodle art there is a certain texture you have to follow. It's the whole meditation behind the action that is that gives you fruit. So the more consciously you make these dots, the better your artwork will end up looking. In stippling, we are again doing the same thing. Wherever we need a darker tone, we add or increase the number of dots. As of now, I have a certain uniformity in my tone. Everything is looking pretty much flattish. It's not too dark in any one area. But now if I start increasing the dots on the left, the density of the dots will create an illusion of shadow.
I'm using the glass nib, but the ink is not flowing. So, is there something I can do?
Are you using Black Star?
No, I'm using the ink that's come with it.
Okay, what ink is
Sure.
that?
It's not given, it's just written ink Excel. There's
Have you diluted it?
no, I should dilute it. It's
Yes.
already very liquid, like very thin.
Take a little bit and dilute it and see if that changes. Because see, now on the glass nib, this is working because I know Black Star has a certain viscosity. Metal nib, obviously, metal and glass will work differently with inks. So it is possible that your nib works well with that ink if it has come together as a set. That means it has been tested. And for glass, maybe you can use something that is slightly thicker.
Yeah, it's working now. I added water, then it is. Thank you.
Oh, great! Lovely, lovely. And the glass nib you can wash. Okay, one more technique. Let's try making these contour lines. We haven't made those. Even these you can make in different ways. Like here I've made a contour line at a particular distance till about 3/4 of the way in. Now I can change the angle of the contour line also. So exactly like this, but a curved line. And within that same curve also I can increase the depth. So this gives even more um, 3D. Okay, now it's about 12:30. So I'm going to give you an exercise that you have to do with your pen and ink every day. You can, of course, practice all these textures, but here's something that will help you become comfortable with your tool. Pick any random object that you have around you, absolutely anything. I often draw this bottle. This has become like my mascot. I don't use this ink, I just use the bottle. So, hold or keep the bottle in front of you and draw what you see in fully in ink as you see it, but make it like a very sketchy, scrabbly drawing. That is essential. What we do not want is a very firm line, too much accuracy. We don't want that. Let your hand flow. Make certain lines which may look like guidelines. Using those lines, make the correct line as you want to. And see how many different things happen on your drawing. Each of those will start adding some flavor to the drawing. Now I have a label that comes like this. I have a highlight, and then I have to create this roundness of the bottle. And then how do I create more depth and a secondary highlight on the right. I need the lid to look like it is black. And then I can also add some pressure strokes in certain places. Like there are certain ridges inside this. Maybe not so pronounced to the right. See? This is the kind of line or pen and ink drawing we want to practice. This is practice. This is not trying to show off your skills in realism. No. This will then help you to loosen up your line and for your eyes to start seeing all these things: form, structure, texture, depth, dimension, tone, values. Sometimes you can also see color through black and white, but only if you make lines which are scribbly, scrabbly, slightly imperfect, and within that it's almost as if within this all of this you're trying to construct something that makes sense. Okay, so keep it messy, keep it free and flowing. What we don't want to expect is absolutely accurate proportions. No. If your lines are static but your proportions are accurate, you have missed the target. That is not what we want. So if this bottle that you're trying to make lands up looking like a jam jar, perfectly fine. As long as the lines are flowing, anything you draw will look good. Okay? So give yourselves no more than 10 minutes. 10 minutes is a long time. 5 minutes or just 3 minutes. 3 minutes at a time. Set a timer, 3 minutes. Pick an object and just draw. Just give me a second, please. All right. Okay, so next week we will be drawing stuff with this. We'll be drawing some flowers and fruits and things like that. Don't bring your pencils and erasers to class. It's going to be directly with ink. Okay. All right. Have fun. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Mm.
Bye.
Bye-bye.